Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at chapter 13, Revelation chapter 13. We're going to try and do the full chapter. It's a pretty eventful chapter. Within this chapter is a verse that everybody loves to speculate on, and a lot of attention has been given to this verse, and we're going to get to that verse today. As we begin chapter 13, recall and keep in mind that the dragon that just stands on the edge of the shore has already been defeated, and that too it was defeated by Michael, the angel. And so with that in mind, I want to help to place roughly at least the time of when this is taking place. If the dragon has been sent to earth at this point, cast out of heaven, let's recognize that this is not a future event, but it's actually a past event. It's an event that's even referred to by Jesus himself in Luke chapter 10. In Luke chapter 10, verse 17, or sorry, rather in verse 18, Jesus says this. He said to them, "I watched Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning." So this is in the context of Jesus sending out the 70 disciples, those who were with him. And after they were able to go out, and on Sunday we had talked about this passage from Matthew's perspective, after they were able to come back, they were able to say that they had actually done what Jesus said they could do. They casted out demons. And Jesus is saying, you're able to do this because the demon's already been cast out of heaven. And so Satan has already fallen, and the battle to some extent has taken place. And even if you go further back into the Old Testament, there's a mention of the fall of Satan there as well. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 is the passage that most everyone uses to derive this idea of the fall of Satan. Now, if you're carefully reading that passage, you'll know that it is primarily referring to the king of Babylon, but pretty much everyone who reads it still recognizes that there are layers of meaning to that passage, and it is talking about that bright and morning star that fell from the sky and was cast down. This is where we get, when we talk about the day star, this is where we get the word or the name Lucifer from. It's not actually a word or a name found in the Bible, but it comes by way of other languages. So Satan, the dragon, it's been cast down. And remember in chapter 12, it was trying to catch the seed of the woman, that child that was to come out, but is unable to because the woman is carried away into safety and the child has been taken up. And so the dragon stops just short of the land and sends his servants instead. This is how he manages to go after the children of the woman. Remember, if he can't get the one, he is going to try and get any of the children of the woman that he possibly can get. And so he sends the first beast out ahead of him, and the first beast rises up out of the water, and we get that clearly in verse 1. And then there's this another beast that's going to come in verse 11, and that beast is going to rise up out of the earth. So let's look at that first beast. That first beast has 10 horns and 7 heads, and this might sound very strange to us, but if we are thorough in our Old Testament, and if we have especially the book of Daniel in our mind, we'll recognize that this is really just a revision of the one that Daniel has back in Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7, he sees 4 beasts coming up out of the sea, and these 4 beasts are perfectly overlapping with this one beast. In this passage, we see in verse 2, the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear, and its mouth was like a lion. If you go and look at Daniel, the first 3 beasts are like a lion, like a leopard, like a bear, and like a lion. And then the 4th beast in the book of Daniel is the one that has all of the horns. It's just all of these ideas are getting jammed into one metaphor here in John's book of Revelation. And this creature comes up out of the sea. That's out of the place where the dragon seems to enjoy life the most. It's a chaotic space. And this beast has been given all of the authority of the dragon. And this is an interesting parallel to the rest of the verse that we didn't read when I referenced Luke chapter 10. So Luke chapter 10, verse 18 said, and I'll read it again, I watched Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning. Now, verse 19, Jesus goes on to say something. He says, see, I have given you authority to tread on snakes and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing will hurt you. So Jesus is giving his authority to his followers to do what can be done to push back the dragon or the demons or evil. And here you can see that the dragon is doing a similar sort of thing. It's giving the beast the authority that it has. The authority to do what? To create havoc, to drag people, or to by deception trick people away from following God, just like the serpent did in the Garden of Eden. So this beast, it helps us to understand, especially because we have the book of Daniel in our mind. In Daniel, each one of these beasts represents a kingdom, a kind of earthly sovereignty. This is a place where human will and human power are the pinnacle of all authority in the world. And so if the beasts in Daniel refer to the ungodly kingdoms of the world, then the beast that we find here most likely also refers to the ungodly kingdoms in this world. The horns in Daniel chapter 7 refer to specific leaders and rulers. Not all of these leaders or rulers in the book of Daniel are named, but nonetheless, they refer to individuals, they refer to key figures. And again, you can get the idea, especially considering that each one of these horns in Revelation has a crown that is a symbol of royalty, a symbol of governance, a symbol of human authority. Now, this beast that comes up has a way of exerting its authority over all the people around. But there's something particularly interesting about at least one of the heads of this beast, the seven-headed beast. One of the heads seems to be mortally wounded. That is, it looks like it has a wound that would have killed it or should have killed it. But the wound has been healed, and this head still has life in it. It's a clear reference to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, where there the passage spoke, and this is God prophesying here. And God is saying that he will strike your head and you will strike his heel. That's a prophecy about the seed of the woman will crush the seed of will crush the head of the serpent, in fact. And so this beast, even though it's not the dragon, the beast also has a wounded head. And so I think what is trying to be conveyed is this idea that even the dragon was defeated, this beast also bears on it the marks of defeat itself. But notice the very strange irony that's taking place. This beast that looks like it should have died is alive, and everyone seems to be amazed by it. If you look at verse 4, or in end of verse 3, in amazement, the whole earth followed the beast, and they worshipped the dragon who gave the authority to the beast. What's happening here? It seems like it's an evil parallel of how the disciples were stirred into amazement by the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus was mortally wounded, but then he came back to life. And here you have someone pretending to do a similar sort of trick, and everyone falls for it. So much so is this the parallel between this beast as a false version of Jesus, that this question arises out of the mouths of the people. They say, who is like the beast and who can fight against it? That phrase, who is like, is a very common phrase that repeats throughout the Old Testament. The real question should have been phrased, who is like God? Who is like Yahweh? Who is like, and this is exactly what the name Michael means, Mikael. Who is like El? Who is like God? It shows up countless times in the Bible, not countless times, I would say a little less than 15. But in Psalm chapter 35, verse 10, I'll just read one reference. There it goes like this. The psalmist says, "O Lord, who is like you? You deliver the weak from those too strong for them, the weak and needy from those who would snatch them away." If you look at Psalm 35, verse 10, Psalm 71, verse 19, Psalm 113, verses 5. And this is a recording, so you can always go back and rewind and see what that says. The people seem to get it all wrong in that they think that this beast is the greatest thing ever. And even that, more than that, they think that no one can ever have the power and the authority to challenge this beast. Who can fight against the beast? Well, the followers of God can. The followers of Jesus can fight against the beast. And moreover, the beast's master has already been defeated. And so all the more confidence then for the followers of Christ to recognize that they can stand up against the beast. And nonetheless, this governing power continues its reign for 42 months. Remember, 42 months is not a literal time frame here. It is a similar reference, just like the last set of references that we've had of 3.5 years. 42 months is 3.5 years. It's a period of extended delay, but it has a fixed limit. And so we know that there will be an end to this, and it's not excessively long, though it might feel like it. This is a reference to basically the period of time between the ascension of Jesus and the return of Jesus. And what is the beast doing? The beast is constantly undermining the message of God with lies. It's constantly trying to spoil the name of God by speaking blasphemy against God and spoiling his dwelling, that is heaven, or the place where he reigns. Remember, we had talked about this in another forum of how thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, this beast is trying its best to stop that from happening. Sadly, or however you want to view it, the beast is given the opportunity and is allowed to even win over the saints. It kills the saints. And this is a clear reference to the power that the beast has to afflict the church. Or if you want to go back 2 chapters to the 2 witnesses that were killed by the beast that comes up from the sea, this very same beast, you'll recognize that this is a metaphor or a symbol of how Satan's servants, that is through, you could say, political powers in this world, earthly, ungodly political powers in this world, are able to defeat, at least temporarily, the people of God. Worship of the beast becomes the same as worship of the dragon, who gives authority to the power in the beast. There's no distinction made. Well, if you serve the beast, you are serving the dragon. And it seems like everyone falls for this except for those whose names are in the book of life. And then now we get to this passage in verse 9 and 10, especially verse 10. It is a tricky passage to translate. I think the NIV translation gets it right. And the NIV translation goes like this: if anyone is if anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. What does that mean? Well, notice first of all that verse 9 is telling us that this key, or this bit of wisdom, it's not given to everybody. It's given to those who have an ear to listen. And we've heard that phrase already a number of times in the beginning of the book of Revelation. In fact, that was the phrase that was given to each one of the church. If anyone has an ear, let them hear, let them listen to what the Spirit is saying, what the Lord is saying. So this is a message of wisdom for the believers. What is it telling us? It's telling us that if basically the fate that comes to us is the fate that is meant. People will be persecuted within the church. The people who follow and worship God and oppose the beast, they will be killed. And this is not outside of God's plan. If we have an ear to hear it, then know that understand that this is not meant to be something that can be escaped. This is part of the ministry of the slaughtered lamb. And it doesn't sound easy, and nobody wants this to happen, but this is how we get to the last part of verse 10. This is a call for endurance and for faithfulness, continued faithfulness for the saints. You see this all around. You don't have to fast forward into the future even to recognize that these events are taking place, how there are political powers, how there are rulers and leaders who defame the Christian faith, who make it out to be something that it's not, by blaspheming it, by calling it what it's not. And people who follow Christ end up either, if you are in another country, we've seen it happen, they're led into captivity, or we've seen it in other places, especially where they are persecuted and martyred. We don't see those things exactly happening here in our own nation, but recognize that in a way, this is still continuing to happen. There are certain rulers at work, certain powers at work, which are the offshoot of the dragon itself. Also, if you want the background for this verse is not something that John came up on his own. This is basically a rethinking of Jeremiah chapter 15, verse 2. The key difference here is that in Jeremiah 15, verse 2, it talks about the outcome of sin. For those who persist in sin, you get what you get. But here it's in the context of believers to recognize that when you get what happens, you can still endure, and you should still endure. In fact, we're meant to face persecution and death. That's the call of everyone when Jesus says, daily carry your cross. It doesn't mean you get to escape it. It means that you have a clear sense of the resurrection that lies on the other side. And so out of love for others, you bear that cross and you move forward. And we've seen how the message of the Lamb is the only message that's able to bring about true transformation, and that's being subtly made clear here. But let's not dwell too long there, because there's still one more beast left. And the second beast comes up out of the ground, and this beast has two horns. This is Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8 talks about a very similar sort of vision. If the first beast represents the ruling authorities, the governors, the kings, the emperors, the whatever else you want to say. Some people get very nervous if you say the presidents or the prime ministers, but it includes all of these things as well. If the first beast represents those things, then the second beast represents the economic machine of the dragon. It's an extremely deceptive sort of mechanism. in that it performs great signs on par with what Elijah did. Elijah was able to challenge the false prophets by calling fire down from the sky or from heaven. And here, the second beast is able to do the same thing. It's able to perform all sorts of things that convince and deceive the world into worshiping the beast. And it goes one wicked step further by creating in the image of the beast. And that's what the passage tells us in verse 15. And he gives breath to that image. This should be very obvious for us, because we know that humans are made in the image of God, and that God is the one that has breathed life into humans. But here, the beast, through this economic system, through this sort of mechanism of establishing societies, it has created a kind of subhumanity, one created in the image of and breathed into by the beast itself. And then what do you find on these new people, on the people that follow the beast? Well, the only way in which you can survive, it seems, is by carrying the mark of the beast on either the hand or the forehead. And what does that mean? This is a passage that a lot of people love to focus their attention on. In order to understand this, let's go back to the Old Testament and get a sense of where these metaphors come from. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 8, especially verse 4. It's called the Shema in Hebrew. This is the thing that was most repeated by the Jewish people. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone, or the Lord our God is one, depending on how you translate that. It goes on to say, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding to you today in your heart. Recite them to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're away, when you lie down, when you rise up. And then verse 8, bind them as a sign on your hand and fix them as an emblem on your forehead. It is metaphorical language that's meant to talk about how if you want to love the Lord your God, then keep the law of God on your hand and on your mind. Everything you do, all your actions need to be motivated by love, by following the Torah. The Torah in its perfection, it's really just loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. This is what Jesus was able to sum the entire law into those two simple commands. Now, if that is in our hands, if that is imprinted on our minds so that all of our thoughts are in that way, that is the true Israelite. That is the one who loves and follows God. Now, if you take that too literally, it can become a hazard. For example, not to overdo this or to caricature the ultra religious Orthodox Jewish people, they will literally wrap around their arm. And if you've ever gone to Israel, to Jerusalem, you'll see them. They will wear a small box wrapped on their arm, and inside that box would be the Ten Commandments. And sometimes you'll see them with a small black box wrapped around their forehead. This is their way of literally following the law, but they're also, I believe, trying to follow the spirit of the law as well. Now, some people think that when the book of Revelation tells us about the 666 on the hand or the forehead, that it must be something literal. It's not. There is no microchip that's going to be implanted into your hand or into your forehead that's going to somehow have the barcode 666 on it. That's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is if you want to survive in this world, then your hands and your thoughts have to be motivated by following the will of the beast now. And that's what this means. This 666 is like the opposite of the Shema. It's like the anti-Shema. Now, what does that number mean? There's a whole lot of people who have many different theories on this. Let's recognize, first and foremost, that if God and John wanted to make it abundantly clear, he could have done so. It's left intentionally puzzling. And I think that puzzling nature, that riddle of a challenge that he gives to us, leaves us with several options to accept or to choose from or to wrestle with, however you want to think about it. One way of thinking about this number, it's clearly one digit off or one number off in each one of its digits from the number 777. 7 being a number of perfection, 3 connotating a trinity of sorts. And so the beast, the dragon, and the second beast, it kind of creates an unholy trinity, not perfect. It is one less. And so the number 6 is a number of imperfection. And so it could refer to something like that. Many scholars have also pointed out that there is a more complex, but perhaps more satisfying answer to this number 666. In our English language, we use Roman numerals. 1 through 9, or 0 through 9 are the digits that we have in our numerical system. And we have numbers for it. In Hebrew, there are no numerals. Instead, in Hebrew, each letter represents a quantity. So Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Daleth, Chewan, Zayin. If you keep going through all of these letters, each letter represents a different value. And every word, if you take the value of each letter and add it up, it represents then a number. And there's a whole thing to this. All of the Jewish people know this today, and this is no secret or mystery. If you take the word for beast and you bring it into Hebrew and look at the numbers, it adds up to 666. Literally speaking, the word beast is the number 666. That's one very obvious way of deriving the meaning of this number. Another, a deeper way of understanding it is to consider that in verse 18, it says that this is a number of a person. And so many people are trying to figure out, who is this person referring to? The earliest name that kind of solves this riddle is the name of the worst emperor that John knows of at that time. And that's the Emperor Nero. And so if you take the name Nero Caesar, which is Greek, but then transliterate that into Hebrew, it's the number 666. Now, whether or not it refers to Nero or if it refers to another character, I think the point is this. The point is to say that there is a way of living that is of the beast. And it seems that people believe that the only way to survive in this world is by adopting that name and that number upon themselves. Think of the business world today. If you want to get ahead, if you want to advance, and to some degree, you can't be this innocent, honest person. There needs to be a little bit of that 666 attitude in order to advance. Now, of course, that is an obvious generalization. Not everyone who gets to the top of success, it doesn't mean that they're evil, but this is an idea. This is a way of life that so many people are following. We need to be very careful as followers of Christ, as a church community, to recognize the very deceptive nature of the second beast, especially considering that it is able to do things that the prophets were able to do. And to listen and not be led astray, though, by the false teachers that may promote hatred or that may promote prejudice, or those that promote a kind of prosperity gospel. And there's all sorts of number of other blasphemous ways of understanding God. We have to be very strong and vigilant. And when we are strong and vigilant, it will lead to persecution. If you know that ahead of time, hopefully you'll have the courage to persevere, and to make it till the end. Now, this is where we end up at the end of this chapter. But chapter 14 is going to be beautiful. So if this is a bit upsetting or nerve-wracking, don't worry. Chapter 14 is filled with hopefulness and victory. And so we'll take that up next week. So we'll pause here and take any questions that you may have.